ので我々は毎年必ず神田明神に行って。
そういうのもあるんですか？
そうですね。はい。新しいIT なんですけど、神様がいる。
すごいですね。
はい。日本ではそういう位置づけになってますね。はい。そして
なるほどです。
で我々がお守りをいただいて、で社員にみんな1年間持ってる今年1年の範囲をお願いしっていうのが。
Okay, so experience in the workplace is
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, so
You've
far,
assimilated like well, everything is okay. Because like I see you interacting with your coworkers as well, right? It's like you're just like like everybody else.
Well, speaking Japanese also helps. So like if you were in an office where there are international employees and Japanese employees, but like not everyone speaks Japanese, and like maybe like 2/3 do, and you're like in the 1/3 that doesn't. Maybe that's a completely different experience. But in my case, there's no other black or white foreigner in the office. I'm the only one. I'm the first one. So I think like people aren't exactly even sure like how to react to me or whatever. But I mean, they're all just trying their best to make me feel at home.
Yeah.
So they go out of their way like just to like try to make sure I'm okay. So it's like I'm getting the opposite from like being tortured or something like that. It's actually pretty good. Because I've heard some stories. I've heard stories about like people they work in a Japanese office and like something goes south, or like I haven't seen any of that. So.
Okay. So do you feel like you have this responsibility, being the first person to make sure that you're upstanding and making sure that you pave the right way for anyone else that may come in afterwards? Do you feel that the weight of that?
It's a huge responsibility.
You feel it?
I feel it all the time. It's a huge responsibility because, I mean, if I screw up at work and I don't do what I'm supposed to do, I cut corners, make stupid mistakes, not thorough, then that would obviously impact the next person, right? And so, like, I always try and look out for, like, when I see other black people in Japan and stuff, I always try and look out, make sure they're okay. And I always tell people, like, we got to represent, you know what I mean? Because there's somebody else behind us, and we don't want them to be negatively affected by like our decisions. We want them to we want to pave it so like, oh, another black guy, oh, that's who we want.
Yeah.
We want those black guys because they're super smart. They think critically. They don't cut corners. We want those black guys. That's the impression I always try and leave people with.
Okay, that's a good impression. So tell me, like, advice for people who are looking at, because as you said, you had some trepidation coming in, and there are people still, even now, who have that same trepidation, right? Like, people send me emails, and they're terrified. What advice could you impart to those people who are watching this right now, who want to maybe enter the workforce in Japan in the corporate environment? Any advice you could impart?
Yeah, I have a couple advice.
Okay.
Number one is, a lot of people talk about how Japanese companies don't give foreigners a chance. How there's a lot of racism towards foreigners in Japan. And what I've noticed is that those are usually two types of people. Number one, someone who's never been in Japan and just saw a YouTube video, so they just don't know because they've been misinformed. And then the other group is people who do live in Japan and have been sort of trapped into, they haven't been able to do what they want. But one of the things that I always say is, if you don't, I think there's two big points here. Number one is, if you don't ask, the answer is always no. So, a lot of people in Japan, they go on, when they want a job, they go on a foreigner's, a job site just for foreigners, right? Or they talk to a company that's known, there's a foreign company that they know hires foreigners in Japan. And my advice is, like, you don't have to do that. If there's a company you see out there and you want to work for them and they don't have any information about hiring foreigners, you could still reach out to them.
But you need Japanese.
Well, so that's the second point is, like, you don't always need Japanese.
Okay.
Well, let me say, you don't always need Japanese, and you never know until you ask, right? So, like, if you don't ask, the answer is always no. And maybe if you could go on a Japanese website. You go to a Japanese employment website where they're just looking for Japanese workers. Put your resume out there, and just start talking to people. Go to the toast. Don't be afraid to go places where you're the only black guy. Like, you can go to if you were in the States and you would be going to Toastmasters organizations, then do it in Japan. If you were in the States and you would be working with or in States or whatever country you're from, you'd be networking with all these. Do it in Japan. Don't feel nervous or intimidated to be the only black person there, and I'm not saying I don't get those feelings. Like, when I come into certain different settings, I'll go to some sort of like group meetup group or something where it's just like people who are in the finance industry or something like that, and I'll be the only black guy there, or I'll go to some sort of finance organization, I'll be the only black guy there, and I feel nervous about it at first, but it's just like at the end of the day, when that first person comes up and talks to you, and you strike up a great conversation, then you automatically, yes, I'm so glad I'm here, and those are what leads to opportunity. So nobody should, number one, feel like I can't do something I couldn't do in the States. I can't just reach out to some random company just because, I'm a foreigner. And don't just say just because you don't speak Japanese that you're not going to try anything except for being an English teacher. Because there are jobs that I've heard of where people who are not fluent in Japanese are working in Japan and they're not English teachers. So that's the thing. The second point is, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It is important to learn Japanese if you want to live in Japan for the long term. And the reason why I say that is say you were in any country, and I'm from America, so I'll use America as an example. And imagine you're looking for to assimilate even. I don't have to assimilate, but I can fit in, and I can in Japan, you should know that you're doing that. One of the things that happened to me when I first got here was like I was offending people because I was breaking cultural norm, and a lot of it was not at work, but in social situations. And I just was doing something wrong, and I didn't really know about it. But that's the difference between doing that and knowing that you're doing something wrong, and then still saying, "Hey, look, I grew up a different way. I'm going to do my own way, and I'm going to break the rule." So those are two different things. You just need to be kind of aware of what you're doing. This isn't just for Japan. I mean, I guess wherever you go to a new country, learn the norms, learn what the culture is, and then once you've got that, and follow it until you got really comfortable with it, then once it becomes routine, then you start being yourself and start breaking the rules. I think that's sort of one of the keys.
So what was the mistake you made?
So one of the things that happened with me is in Japan there's something called joge kanke. So this means up-down relationship. So based upon age, there's a big culture of senpai and kohai. So someone who's older than you or someone who's younger than you. And at work, you often call someone your senpai, or you call them your kohai, based off of kohai is younger, senpai is older. And even outside of work, this age relationship is rather important. And within certain social groups, it may not just simply be age, but there may be, someone in the group who has a position of power because maybe he started off the group, or he was one of the founders of the group, or this person, just for whatever reason, maybe he's good at it. Maybe it's a sports group. Like, I play basketball in Japan, so like maybe he's like really good. He's been an important part of the team, so he's got that certain standing within that. And you'll notice that everyone within the group sort of defers to this person. People defer to the people who's above them, and they treat the people who are below them a certain way as well. And so I didn't really understand that perfectly. I mean, when I first got to Japan, so there were situations where I should have been using like des mas form. I should have been speaking in the polite language, but I was just speaking in casual language. Or there were situations where I interrupted someone who was actually older than me speak. I was just just little things that I wasn't really picking up on. And so like those things I think are okay to like break certain rules or to break the hierarchy as long as you realize what you're doing and you're conscious of it and you have a strategy for it and you can accept the consequences that come with it.
With your interactions with your coworkers, what has that been like for you? Do you feel like as a part of the company, you don't feel different at all? Like I've seen you in different settings here and you just move just like the same as everyone else. And I get this